God. Look out. Oh, no! The God Almighty! The God Almighty! That killed him! Oh, my God. As God is my witness, he is broken in half!
Hey guys, WaifuGate back again with another deck guide. For those of you new to the channel, I do one of these deck guides every week, usually 2 to 3 of them. So if you guys like that, I have a playlist dedicated specifically for these deck guides. Once we do like rotation or whatever, I'll probably separate them into like archived like Ikoria, etc. with the new set. So if you guys like that, you know, they're gonna keep coming. They're not going to stop, you know. So this time we're going to be going over Yorion Blink, like Yorion Flicker, U White, Blue White, however you want to pronounce it. Usually people do U White. So here we go. So what does the deck do? And how does it work? So we basically provide card advantage and consistency with our early game cards, such as Birth, Omen, and then sometimes neutralize if we have to cycle it. Same thing with Shark Typhoon. We can guarantee land drops pretty consistently. Like we're running 36 here. And that's pretty consistent. I think you could even drop it to like 35 if you really wanted to because of the births. I just like keeping at 36. So if I have to trim the births sideboard, like, you know, for more counter spells or more board wipes, whatever, then I'm not hurt as much by my land drops, because I still have 36. Whereas if I really rely on the birth to hit land drops, then it's rough, especially in control matchups where you might not be able to tap out on 2 because of Teferi slamming down and then you not being able to answer him. It's really important to be able to trim this card, in my opinion. So that's why I like to keep my lands a little higher than lower. So we've got here, you can see here, we have a lot of tech versus blue decks because they're pretty big right now. Jeskai Yorion, you know, Winota Jeskai, Cycle Jeskai, etc. Like a lot of their cards can be disputed. Not so much like Jeskai Cycle as much. Like you can use this as a 3-mana counter spell to Zenith Flare late game, but it's kind of weak. It's just another option. It's definitely a good card to sideboard out against, you know, Jeskai, or like against certain lists. Not against Jeskai, like just against like, you know, Rakdos or something. You know, it's an easy cut. Easy 4-of cut for better cards like Grafdiggers and stuff. We'll get into the sideboard later. But basically it just functions in the sense that there's a lot of draw power, Chemisters, Omens, a lot of consistency with lands, Birth. Prince Charming here is just to blink in the Yorion. It gives you sort of like infinite value if they don't answer one of the pieces of the puzzle there. And it's just not a bad card to get early game. Sometimes in like the tricolor or quad color decks for Yorion, I'll end up cutting the prince just because I don't like seeing them. A lot of the time, like, you just have more access to better cards with different colors. But in the U White version, he seems to fit in here pretty nice at 1 copy. I don't mind him. And then you've got Narset, Teferi, Elspeth. Those are your main targets, and Prince Charming for Yorion to blink. The powerful thing about these lists is that you can always threaten to blink in Elspeths. If they don't answer Elspeths, you say, I'm gonna go Yorion and do that again. You're gonna like it. And that's pretty much the name of the game with these types of lists. Even Jeskai Yorion does it, you know. Doesn't always threaten to do agent stuff, you know. So there's that. And we're pre-boarded against some aggro, and this is just good against Yorion anyway. Like 2 mana answer Yorion feels good, man. Just super nice. So we've got that rolling. What else is there? So that's pretty much how the deck functions. Late game, your win cons are a 1-of Dream Trawler, which is enough. You don't need more than this. You never even need to see them sometimes. You can get there with like Shark Typhoon and Planeswalkers and such. Something I would consider for this list heavily if I had it would be an Elspeth. I don't have her crafted. But one of these I would highly recommend for the list. You can cut anything. Like you can cut a Dispute, cut 1 Narset, put her in, cut anything but Teferi, basically. Cut, probably not Shark Typhoon either. Maybe a land or something, you could probably do it, or like 1 Essence Scatter. But I would definitely consider this. I'm just really cheap with my wild cards. I like to stockpile them There's a meme on my stream where, you know, I just don't spend wild cards. So there you go. So I would definitely consider one of these, especially since it's like tokens. It gives you some fodder for your graveyard. Like normally you have Uro. This just gives you more flexibility. So I definitely consider this card 100%. So good. Or like a second trawler or something for a win con. You can run more than one, but I like the one. And then you get there eventually by being able to make a big Shark Typhoon end of turn, Dream Trawler, or just playing out the Shark Typhoon once you have counterspell backup, like Neutralize, Mystical Disputes. Probably not Mystical Disputes, but like, you know, you just have answers to what your opponent might do in response to your Shark Typhoon, and then you can kind of get there. So there's that. That's pretty much what it does, though. It just relies on having 2 colors. We're running the triomes here. We're running 4 of these just to be able to have more islands and more planes to check our Ardent Vales and our castles. This can also be a win con too. It's really slow, but it can get you there if you're making 1 to 2 tokens per turn and just controlling whatever your opponent's doing. It's very viable, and we can control our own draws pretty well with Vantress, which is like, you know, I consider this almost drawing a card because a scry is basically half a draw. I read that somewhere in a guide. So 2 scries is basically like drawing a card. It's not like 100% true, but it's pretty close. It's close enough. And in this type of a deck, you want 3 of those because you have an 80 card pile. So there you go. So that's pretty much covering like how the deck works and functions for the most part. We also have the best board wipe in current standard, which is Shatter. And then we have Time Wipe. So as a backup, as a one of. I think we're packing 1 in the sideboard for aggro as well, just for consistency. Because you don't want to lose to like mono red because you can't wipe the board. Shark Typhoons also help stave off the aggro. So yeah, here we go. So what else? So we've got good, even, and bad matchups. I would say good matchups are mono red. I would say Reclamation's a little tricky game 1, but I think that we do pretty well against them overall just because we have a lot of counter spells and we have 4 vetoes for priority. I would say the hardest card to beat would be Nightpack Ambusher because we want to sideboard out some of our board wipes. So I would say keep in like, you know, 3 board wipes. We'll have the sideboard guide down below like always under the featured deck. If you click on that, usually there's a sideboard guide below down the images. If I don't have one up, stop by my stream, slap me around a little bit. You know, just be like, hey, WaifuGate, you don't have a sideboard guide for this, and we'll make it right on the spot. All right, we'll do it for you. Unless we're in the middle of a game, and then it'll be after the game. But anyway. So the sideboard guide will cover all of that stuff. But yeah, I would say Nightpack Ambusher is kind of tricky. It's probably like even with Reclamation because it's such a powerful deck. The new list coming around with Croakeys and Danny T, the one that does more like Flash, where it runs a lot more creatures, like it runs Kurega. That one we definitely leave in more shatters against, and we try to just resolve it to Teferi and then shatter on their turn, or just in general try to shatter while we have Teferi up. Pretty safe, pretty good. And then that deck kind of struggles to win after that, like all Reclamation lists. They just struggle versus Teferi. And since we're packing 4 Disputes main deck, it should be a little bit easier than usual to sort of stabilize. And we have 4 Shark Typhoons for their Shark Typhoons, so it's nice. What else? So Jeskai Yorion, I would say we're pretty even on. Maybe a little unfavored just because the deck is really, really hard to beat. We do run a lot of counter spells, so it's kind of nice. Our Essence Scatters are pretty dead, I think, until super late game when they have to start hard casting their Yorion because we keep, you know, stopping the Luca from actually comboing off and whatnot. We can keep the tokens kind of cleared off here and there too. So, because that deck can actually run like an aggro deck with enough Omen of the Suns and whatnot. Like it gets pretty frustrating having to clear the board and then do something else, you know? So, and like the more I played with this, the more I wanted non-Yorion lists, like just a U white, like I'm going to counter your stuff type dealio. But doing that limits the amount of counter spells you can have. And I feel like that's kind of a big deal. There's a lot of tossing and turning with these types of lists, comparisons, pros and cons. So I'm still on the train where I think 60 card decks are a little bit better on average, but a lot of the MLP players are saying that Yorion's pretty busted, and Yorion Fires being the top deck right now. It's kind of obvious, you know, that there's some type of truth to the power level of that deck. Anyway, so I think we're kind of even against Jeskai Yorion, like maybe slightly unfavored. We do have a lot of sideboard tech like vetoes. We can even bring in Grafdiggers, like I said, down below for the sideboard guide eventually. And then Heliod's is okay for their fires, but this is a little bit weak against them. I don't think I'd bring this in. Probably sideboard out some number of stuff, but it's just kind of hard to say whether we're super favored or not. I need more testing. I have been doing a lot more testing specifically versus certain decks. Like I've been asking my viewers to be like, hey, do you guys have any meta lists I need to play against this, this, and this? And they'll be like, yeah, I've got that deck. And then we just jam out a few games and it's kind of casual, but we get a lot of good testing done. And we can talk about sideboard options, what they didn't like me doing. You know, like this was really frustrating. I couldn't really deal with it when you're representing this. And then I can learn, you know, well, we can all learn, you know, the pros and cons of certain lists and how to kind of edge our advantage in the ways that the other list doesn't like, you know, and I love that. So I'm really looking forward to more streams like that. But getting back into the matchups and stuff, what other meta lists are there? Jeskai Cycling, I think we're slightly favored against because we have so many counter spells for Zenith Flare. And we have, I would say the lack of life gain is the weakness of this list versus stuff like Sakdos, Mono Red, and Cycling. Like Prince Charming gains you a little bit of life, Birth gets you a little bit of life, but overall pretty weak life gain. Like we're not packing Absorbs, you know, we're not packing Uro. We're not packing like Oath of Kyle like the Esper variant can rock. So there's a lot of pros and cons to adding a third color for life gain or for something that this one's kind of lacking. But I do like the simplicity of blue-white and I want to explore it a little bit more. Winota, I think we're slightly favored against just because we have a lot of counter spells and a lot of board wipes. We can kind of just wipe them up a little bit. As long as they don't have the nuts, we're usually pretty okay. It's just really hard when someone has a really good hand and they just burst you down and there's nothing you can do. But we said about any matchup, like Reclamation, just having like, you know, Dispute plus backup for Wilderness and such. Like it's just hard to deal with a lot of that stuff. Bant Ramp, I would say that it's even, I would say, just because our sideboard's really good against them with the vetoes and such, and we're already packing Dispute's main deck. We can also bring in Grafdiggers if we're really afraid of like Uro coming back or whatever. Like, I don't know if that's super legit. And we also have like, yeah, it's pretty much just the vetoes and packing the Dispute's main deck. Like, as long as we can control the Elspeths, we're fine. It's just that they play at a higher number of lands than we do. So we really have to pray that they are tapped out and we can get a good Casualties of War out, maybe take out their Castle Vantress, and then, like, you know, stop their card advantage through, like, Elspeth Conquers Death, being able to Casualties that, plus a Planeswalker. And, like, maybe they're Yorion or something, but Agent's kind of a hard card to beat, but we are packing the Essence Scatters for Yorion and Agent, so it's kind of up in the air. I'd say that matchup's pretty even. Mono Red and Obosh both, and Tamir Reclamation are all a little unfavored, just because like we don't have a lot of life gain against Mono Red and against Obosh. We do have really good tools against a lot of their stuff like Grafdiggers, Glass Caskets. We're dedicating a lot to aggro here. It's a pretty big commitment, and the Time Wipe and the Heliod's. Like traditional Mono Red we can pretty much smash because of Heliod's as long as we draw well. We have to draw well. And it's an 80 card pile, so there is that. But other than that, it's pretty easy, I think. Like, Tamir Adventure is always hard for control lists. I think I've said that in like two deck guides now. It's just a hard thing to deal with. So, other than that, though, and we do have vetoes and stuff for that list. Like, we can veto the Lucky Clover if we're on the play, for example, because our lands are pretty kind to us in regards to tapped and untapped sources. So yeah, it's pretty much just up in the air there with those lists. So Tamir Elementals, kind of worth mentioning. Like, I think we just smashed that matchup for the most part. Like, Essence Scatters kind of blow up the Cavaliers, which is usually a really hard card to answer. Same thing with Elspeth, same thing with Yorion, blinking that stuff. Dream Trawler is kind of a weak win con, as well as Shark Typhoons, but if we go wide enough, they can't really deal with the Shark Typhoon army. And we do have quite a few board wipes. It's just that we don't have a lot of sideboard cards for the Cavalier specifically, so if we struggle with it game 1 and we still struggle with it game 2, maybe we need to consider better sideboard options there. Most of what we have here is against like Winota with this, Luca with this sort of, Luca with this. Like, we're dedicated to a lot of the like the top 3 or 4 metas, I would say, meta decks. Just stuff to consider, you know. And I love Shark Typhoon, man. Such a good card. Mulliganing and such. So basically, hands that you want to keep, you can always consider your opponent's companion. Always look for that. You can see like the little name up here when the game starts usually, because they have to show it. And like, so that's going to determine a lot of your mulligan strategies. If your opponent doesn't mulligan, or doesn't show a companion, it could mean a few things. It could mean like they're mono red potentially. You can just check the meta list on MTG Goldfish or Aether Hub or something and go through and see like what lists don't run a companion, you know, and then go from there. Like a lot of people are running like Kahira with elementals or Yorion with elementals to be able to flash and blink them and such. Reclamation has started to run a companion, so if you see Kurega, you might have to plan for Reclamation on top of Jeskai Fires, like something to consider, you know. If they don't show anything, it could be Tamir Elementals. It could be Rakdos without a companion, which is rare. If it's Luris, it's either going to be Cycle or Sakdos. So like, just kind of plan accordingly for that. Like if your opponent shows Yorion, your Essence Scatter isn't dead, but you might not want it for a while. Disputes are obviously going to be good because you can always hit Yorion with it. You know, Neutralize is great against that list, etc. Teferi is fine. But basic mulligan strats are like 2 to 3 lands plus Birth, Omen, any of your early game plays, and Neutralize. Stuff like that. And Shark Typhoon isn't bad to keep in your opening hand because it can counter Teferi eventually, not like counter, but you can make a 2/2 that swings in and pretty much kills it, or a 3/3 eventually. It's kind of slow paced, and you can also just discard this, cycle it for 0, and just draw a card and try to hit land drops, so that's super important. And if you're flooded out on lands, like if you're considering keeping a hand because you know, it has 1 or 2 good plays, but then you have 5 or 6 lands. If you have a Triome, it's a little more keepable than usual. Same thing with the Scryland, because you can always chuck this and draw a card. You know, you just got to consider that type of stuff. It's just really important. So I would say like just keep playable cards and lands. It's pretty easy to mulligan with this. It's not too complex. It's not one of the super hard to pilot lists in regards to keeping and mulling. So. And then, like, of course, after you, like, sideboard, there's a whole other ballpark with, like, you know, what you should keep. Like, against aggro, of course, you want to have your glass caskets plus lands. And you want Heliod's versus Mono Red or Sakdos or whatever. This is less important against, like, the Luris version. There's, like, a lot of depth stuff, but we'll cover more of that in the sideboard guide. Which will be under the featured deck list. So that'll pretty much end it for this section. We'll get into the gameplay and kind of close out the video in a little bit. So we'll jump to that now. So we're going to be digging into the gameplay for the U-White Yorion list. This is game 3 of a matchup against, I think it's Orzhov Aristocrats. We've already pre-sideboarded here. I'm going to go through this a little bit too, because I feel like this is an important part of the deck. So we have taken out, I believe, the Mystical Disputes that we had main board, one of the Narsets, and we sideboarded out 1 Chemister's Insight, I believe. So I'm checking the battlefield, seeing if there's anything that I missed, basically, here, and then I'm just going to click Done. What the cards that I brought in... Cards that I brought in were 3 Grafdiggers, of course, for Broodmoth and whatnot. It also works against Cat Oven, like the Cat Oven combo. Like if you see this in your opening hand, it's just really, really solid against these types of lists, especially when they're also trying to do the whole thing with Broodmoth, because that's another card that just loses to Grafdiggers. It's just super nice. Now, Black-White has slightly more answers to like artifacts and stuff if they so wish to bring it in. Maybe a Mortify. Mortify doesn't work on this, but you know what I mean? Like anything else, like Disenchant, etc. It's very easy to sideboard into that hate, since you know, the deck sort of has some open slots here and there post-sideboarding. And then we brought in 4 glass caskets, and I think that's about it. And then I sideboarded out the disputes course. Now Archons, I'm not sold on the what is it, 95 in these Yorion lists yet. I think that we could do better sideboard options with Sun Archons, either put that main deck or just cut it all together for better options. I'll try to keep the if I play this list a lot, I'll try to keep the Aether Hub sideboard guide up to date and everything. So we'll just get into the gameplay now. I just wanted to cover the sideboard since I feel like that's a pretty important deal. So here we go. I think this is against one of my viewers as well. It might just be traditional. It might have been just a traditional queue as well, like non-ranked. But I've been doing a lot of viewer battles. So we took a quick mull there. One land's not really good enough. I also need to update the basics in this deck so they're pretty. So we keep the Prince Charming. We keep a land drop because we're looking at Time Wipe and we really want to cast that on curve. And they have a Gutter Bones here, which isn't too bad. And we just Prince Charming here, I think, just to scry, I believe, to find another land or two, perhaps maybe a short-term answer. So I think I keep one land here, which is like questionable. Like it's not terrible, it's just like that is 5 lands no matter what. And it's an island. So here I might as well block, even if they can somehow deal damage to me, just to cut them off. And to play around, like, you know, sack effects later on. Plus they played Cruel Celebrant late, like after they swung in, because they thought that I wouldn't block, which is pretty good, because then they don't deal the damage, which 1 life can really make a difference. I actually think that we are down to 1 life at some point in this game, and had they played the Cruel Celebrant first, they actually would have had lethal, which is fun facts. So we just countered the Woe Strider here, pretty easy counter, really high tempo, because they didn't even bring the Gutter Bones back to their hand, which would have been the safer play. They went for a higher tempo play, which is reasonable because if you don't beat these Yorion lists pretty fast, they tend to kind of go up over the top of you. So I think here I actually try to do the math to see if I can Field of Ruin the Castle Lochwain on top of playing the Omen of the Sea. I think I just wait for them to be done with stuff so that they can't use the mana mid-turn for something like a Gutter Bones, because they can't float the mana and do anything really important with it end of turn. So here they're playing around Shark Typhoon since we blew out one of their creatures in the previous games. So they play around that, which is pretty respectable. So yeah, we just take out this because late game that can get really annoying, the card advantage. And I think we just search for blue or white here. It doesn't really matter too much. As long as we have double blue, double white, we don't really need any extra. So we just grab that. We go Omen of the Sea. And we put both on bottom since we already have our land drop. And we're priced into drawing another land pretty soon. This Tranquil Cove is actually supposed to be a Triome, the Jeskai Triome. It's 100% just better than the Tranquil Cove. The life gain can matter, but usually 1 won't really make an impact compared to being able to draw an extra card. I think I keep both of these. Pretty sure I do. It doesn't really matter either one. That they ripped from my hand with a drill bit or something, it's going to be pretty bad. So they have the Brood Moth here, which is a little worrisome, since we don't really have a good answer to that at the moment. Here, this seems like a really weird swing to me, but it's because Brood Moth will just make those cards come back and draw cards and whatnot. So I think here I just casket the Midnight Reaper to take them off card advantage. And then my Time Wipe is looking pretty good next turn. I'm also holding up an Absorb here, which is just, this is just what you love to see with these blue-white control lists, is just being slightly ahead and being able to 1-for-1 your opponent's big threats. Because they have to do a lot in order to overcome your card advantage and just your really efficient answers and powerful cards. So here, I don't think I need to absorb this. Because they won't bring back the Brood Moth if I go to wipe the board. Like, the Brood Moths do not cover each other. So I think that's what I'm trying to puzzle out in my head. And I think I instead just let this resolve, and then I go Omen of the Sea. You can't see my webcam from the original video feed. So I let that resolve, We see the cool Broodmoth effect again. And then I just Omen of the Sea here to scry for 2. And here I'm almost tempted to keep both of these just because they're really, really strong. Like being able to use the Teferi to draw into the land is fine, or I can just draw the Teferi. I think I just put the Teferi on top, and I have the land come into play, I believe, so I don't miss my land drop. It's pretty close. You could probably just pick up the Teferi and move yourself closer, but I instead just do this and time wipe here, I believe. I could have swung in, but the double block would be a little annoying, and then I would lose Yorion. So I just do that, boom, and then they get back their Cruel Celebrant. We lose some life, but we're okay overall. Scryland here, keep Teferi on top because bouncing that isn't the worst thing ever. I think we end up bouncing like a Woe Strider that they escape with, if I'm not mistaken. Oh, they have another Broodmoth. Nice. So we just bounced that Broodmoth, I believe, with our dude bro here, Hero. And we have a Narset. And we just hold back the Absorb for Broodmoth here. And they're pretty priced into either Broodmothing or Woe Strider escaping. I don't think they have enough cards to escape with Woe Strider yet. We're just kind of chilling right now. So we lose Teferi, which he saves us life. That's good. Then they try to develop Broodmoth here. We just counter it. And now they have like maybe, yeah, Witch's Oven, which doesn't bother us too much. They don't really have an engine to go with that. Castle Ardenvale is such a good draw here just because like we can just put out X amount of chumpers. We have nothing to protect this Dream Trawler with, but Dream Trawler kind of just protects itself anyway. We have a Narset we can discard to it if we need to. Just pretty nice overall. Another cool interaction is that Yorion can actually blink the casket and allow us to exile something else, which is pretty nice. And then Priest. So now we're pretty priced into finding an answer for the Priest. We're playing a secondary creature in order to stop the Priest from sacking our Dream Trawler. So it could be Teferi, it could be a lot of things that we just draw into that can answer it. I think here I try to Narset first to see if I can find an easy answer, but I might just go Yorion. I'm not sure yet. I think that I actually let them have double Midnight Reaper. I'm going to go ahead and draw first like a good player. Which we drew into another land, which is pretty medium. They block Trawler, which is fine. This takes away their life gain. And yeah, and they stop us from gaining life here, which is pretty big, honestly. It's not bad. So now they're forced into playing a second creature to make me sack this Trawler. And in this case, I'm just going to Yorion. I think if I Yorion here, I should have Narsetted first to see if I could get a Glass Casket. But since I already know that I'm going to get a Glass Casket off of Yorion here, and I can just solve the Priest issue anyway. It's just like if I could get a Glass Casket off of this, I could also just keep the other card underneath the casket. So here I just grab Elspeth Conquers Death. Casket comes down, gets to Priest, and now we have really thick bodies to block. One that will gain us life as well, which is pretty insane. And we still have access to our most powerful card, which is Dream Trawler. So they get Elspeth Conquers Death. Now there I could have tapped down my dude, like my Dream Trawler, in order to give it hexproof for the turn, but I know that my opponent doesn't have anything, right? So that doesn't really do anything. It would just whiff on the agonizing, like exiling the Elspeths, but I think I would rather have the life gain from this Dream Trawler here if they happen to swing in, which they don't. And then we get to untap, which is pretty much GG. We pick up Absorb, which is a super stellar pickup. We get to dig here for another card, which is probably Teferi. Yeah, I'm pretty sure we grabbed the Teferi here. It's just pretty obvious. So Teferi. And then I think we try to bounce the Woe Strider here, which is pretty reasonable. Gets rid of one of their... Well, they can't really block. It just out-tempos them, so they can't really swing back at us for much. So I'm just taking a moment to think about it here. I've been trying to get better about those habits, like really thinking through what each card does on the field, if there's any interactions I'm missing, like Narset or whatever else. So I swing before, which I don't know if I like or not. I guess it's just because like the oven, they could end up doing something with the oven or whatever, something weird. So I just don't play into it. So we just gain life. I go back up to 17 after being solo in this match. And then I'm checking the graveyard to see if they can escape again if they Witch's Oven it. So we just bounce that. I think they just sack their dude in response to Scry. Yeah. Which is fine. Don't mind that too much. So one to the bottom. And they don't sack the Midnight Reaper or anything. And then we just play Vantress, which is super solid. And now we have an Absorb for something really bad. Like, you know, if they go to play another Priest of the Forgotten Realms or whatever, we can kind of answer it. And we don't even need to, we don't care about this. I don't think I counter this. If I do, it's probably a mistake. I think I just want a bigger Shark Typhoon. Because it doesn't matter what they draw into if it's just lethal anyway. I think here I count my lands and stuff to make sure if it's lethal or not. I've been trying to be better about that as well, like making sure I count my resources and everything. Just a lot you can improve with Magic. It's pretty insane how high the skill cap is. It's pretty much infinite. Like you can just always be a better player. Here I'm counting the mana. I also practice counting the mana without actually highlighting my lands, so I don't give away to my opponent that I'm counting. It can matter in matchups like Tamir Reclamation where they have more interaction with you. Ooh, nice. Yeah, I remember this now. The Chemist's Insight lethal. 2018 is calling, as Grumpy Cat would say. Trying to... They want its Chemist's Insight back. Yeah, we just draw a bunch of cards here. They have no blockers for Trawler. And they actually lose life if they try to gain life with Cat Oven here. We see another sideboard card here with the Time Wipe. Yep. Pretty easy. And then we just, I think I just swing out here. I'm counting, like on the webcam, I'm counting to see if I have Lethal Light from the original video. So I +1 to Fairy just for good habits, keeping up all of those good habits, just for in case it did matter. So it's automatic. So they do this, and then they lose life. They lose 2 life, and then they realize that they're not actually going to gain life off of the cat, and they just scoop. And that's pretty much the game. So overall, this list has been pretty fun. I've had a lot of good games with it. The weakness I would say to it, like, because I'm not 100% sold that this is a really, really, really solid deck, I would say that the weaknesses are that it goes 1 for 1 a lot of the time, and in this meta, you really have to be unfair. You have to, it's basically like people playing solitaire against each other in regards to, I have this overpowered thing, boom. And then it's just like, well, my overpowered thing is better than your overpowered thing. Boom. Actually, my counter to your overpowered thing means that my original overpowered thing, and it just keeps going on like that, you know, Agent Luca, all of that good stuff. It's just really hard to keep up with Winota just grabbing all of your stuff with agents or just one-shotting you with lots of damage in the green like Naya variants and stuff. So there's just a lot of stuff to consider for standard, but regardless of that, I still had a lot of fun playing this list. If I'm in the mood for it, I'll probably play it. But I don't think it's like T1. I think it's probably like a really solid 1.5 tier, where if you stay ahead of the Luca decks and you can counter their stuff, and you're running Mystical Disputes and stuff main board, so you might be able to get away with like game 1 and then game 2 having an even better sideboard against them. But it's going to be close because you're not going to see as many sideboard cards since you're running a Yorion list as well. It's not like we're running 60 card U white, which might be better if you're wanting to just counter Luca. Anyway, I've been trying to do one of these deck guides each week, usually like 2 to 3. And I just recently started to try pushing for 1 YouTube video a day. So hopefully you guys enjoy that. We'll probably have some theme to it, like, you know, most underrated card for this week might always come out on Wednesdays or something. I'll figure it out, you know. And regardless, I appreciate you guys chilling out watching the video. If you have any questions about this deck or any of the other guides, you can feel free to leave a comment below or drop by the stream. Usually stream, it's like Wednesday through Sunday, 2 a.m. until about 10 a.m. or 9 a.m. Central Time. So cheers, and feel free to like and subscribe. And I will catch you guys next time for the next deck guide or whatever other video you guys happen to want to watch. Chilling out.